At some point in life, almost everyone experiences that strange feeling of being disconnected, being in a conversation but not really there. You nod, you smile, you say, "I'm fine." Even when something inside you feels completely off. You agreed to plans you secretly wish would get cancelled. You change the way you talk, your expressions, even your tone, depending on who you're with. And all of this seems normal. It's what we call being polite, adaptable, knowing how to behave in different situations. But sociologist Irving Goffman warned that something much deeper and more dangerous hides behind these small, everyday gestures. He called it impression management, a kind of constant performance we do in daily life. In every new place, around every new person, we unconsciously take on a different role. We adjust ourselves to be accepted, liked, or at least tolerated. According to Goffman, social life works like a theater. We are all actors. Whether we realize it or not, we perform on different stages, at work, at home, on social media, in relationships. On each of these stages, we carefully decide how to dress, how to act, what to say, and what to hide. We do all this to reach a certain goal. To belong, to protect our image, to be seen in the right way. At first, this might not seem like a big deal. It can even feel natural. But there is a price to pay for constantly performing, and it is a heavy one. The cost is losing your sense of self. When you split into too many versions of yourself, none of them truly feel real anymore. It's like wearing so many masks that, one day, you forget what your real face looks like. This creates what Goffman called role distance, a quiet kind of separation between who you are and what you do. You follow routines, go through motions, say the right things, but deep down, you feel detached. You live on autopilot, acting out scripts written by other people's expectations. And this is more common and more harmful than most people realize. Many spend years, even decades, like this, watching their life from the outside. They become strangers to themselves, trapped in roles they didn't choose but felt forced to play. This video dives deep into that silent form of self-betrayal. The goal isn't just to explain it, it's to make you face it, because living to please others might make you seem polite and well-liked, but it comes at a serious cost. Saying yes when you want to say no, smiling to avoid conflict, hiding your emotions because you fear being rejected. These aren't harmless social habits, they are ways you slowly abandon who you really are. Goffman didn't just point out this problem, he showed us that there's a way to break it. He believed you could collapse these stages, not by destroying your relationships or walking away from society, but by learning to stop performing false versions of yourself. Yes, doing that will cause some people to walk away, but the ones who stay will finally meet the real you. And most importantly, you will meet yourself again. So, if lately you've felt that something's off, if you feel drained for reasons you can't explain, if you smile in pictures but feel hollow inside, this message is for you. This is where your journey back to yourself begins. Irving Goffman transformed how we understand human behavior. He saw social life as a series of performances, each interaction, each conversation, as a scene where we act out roles. Whenever you present yourself to others, you're setting up a stage. You create a version of yourself through your tone, your gestures, your posture, your words, all carefully chosen to leave a certain impression. He called this impression management, and it's something almost everyone does. Every time you enter a meeting, you adjust your speech to appear professional. When you visit family, you hide parts of yourself to avoid their judgment. When you're on a date, you carefully decide what to show and what not to. On the surface, these adjustments seem harmless. After all, being adaptable helps us survive in society. But Goffman makes us ask an uncomfortable question. How much of this is a choice? And how much is submission? At what point do we stop adapting and start betraying ourselves? The truth is, most people have learned to please others so deeply that they no longer remember what it feels like to be authentic. It's no longer just about small compromises, it becomes a way of living. You start bending yourself until you no longer know your real shape. Over time, the mask sticks to your face. The act stops being an act. What once was a strategy for survival becomes your personality. You start building different versions of yourself for different situations. One version for work, another for family, another for social media, another for relationships. Each one is shaped by the expectations of those around you. And the problem is, these versions rarely meet each other. The you that your coworkers see doesn't recognize the you that exists when you alone. The you that posts on social media barely resembles the you that struggles quietly, feels lost, or breaks down at night. The result is a fractured identity, a divided self that lives in pieces, each disconnected from the rest. And when you live this way for too long, performing stops feeling like a choice. It becomes a cage. You don't act to express something real anymore. You act to survive. You shape your words and actions, not to share truth, but to protect acceptance. Slowly, without realizing it, you begin to measure your worth by other people's approval. You depend on applause. You rely on being liked. And when that validation disappears, when silence replaces it, the silence feels unbearable. It turns into self-doubt, into guilt, into shame. And yet, many people go through life completely unaware of this. They think they're free because they've learned to fit in. But the truth is, they're performing roles written for them since childhood by parents, teachers, media, and systems that reward obedience and punish authenticity. From an early age, we're taught to act a certain way, to please, to adjust, to be acceptable. We learn which emotions to hide, which dreams are too much, which opinions might make people uncomfortable. We start burying our real selves, one compromise at a time. And as years pass, we begin to forget who we were before all that. We forget what it feels like to say exactly what we think, to feel without filtering, to act without calculating how others will see us. That's why Goffman's question still echoes today, louder than ever. Who are you when no one is watching? When there's no audience to impress, no crowd to please what's left of you? What remains when you stop pretending, even for a moment? Most people avoid that question because the answer can be painful. It can reveal how much of your identity was built on fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being unlovable, as you really are. It can expose how much of your energy goes into keeping up appearances instead of being real. But facing that discomfort is the first step toward breaking the cycle. Because the pain you feel when you realize how much you've betrayed yourself, that pain is not a punishment, it's an awakening. It's the signal that something inside you is finally tired of performing. We live in a world that teaches us to perform from the moment we can speak. We're told to smile, even when we're not happy. To act confident, even when we feel broken. To keep calm, even when we're falling apart. We're rewarded for pretending, but pretending, no matter how polished, always costs something. It costs connection. It costs peace. And slowly, it costs your sense of who you really are. Every time you say yes when your heart screams no, a small part of you goes quiet. Every time you hide how you feel to keep the peace, your voice loses strength. And when you do that for long enough, your real self becomes a stranger. That's why this topic matters. Because it's not just about social theory, it's about life. Your life. When you stop betraying yourself, everything changes. It doesn't happen instantly. It's not easy. But once you start noticing where you've been performing instead of living, you begin to reclaim something sacred, your truth. And that truth might be quiet at first. It might come with confusion or even fear. But it's real. It's yours. And it's the only thing that can make your life feel whole again. It is at this point that the individual starts to realize the cost of self-betrayal, not only psychological, but existential. A lifetime built on edited versions of oneself is by definition a life that has never been truly lived. And this self-betrayal is not abstract. It appears in the most mundane, almost imperceptible details, but deeply destructive. Commitments you hope will be cancelled, promises you make to yourself and never keep. I'm fine choked with pain. In the next section, we will dive into these small behaviors, and show how they are the clearest signs of a self that has been silenced for too long. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. If someone told you that you betray yourself every day, you would probably deny it. After all, the word betrayal carries a dramatic weight. It is something we associate with major ruptures, with unforgivable deceptions. But self-betrayal rarely happens in grand events. It seeps into the details, in silences, in concessions, in socially acceptable lies. And it is precisely this subtlety that makes it so dangerous. You don't realize you are destroying yourself because you do it in the name of harmony, politeness, peace. But deep down, you are bleeding silently. Let's talk about these behaviors. The first is the classic accepting when you wanted to refuse. You are invited to an event, a meeting, a gathering. Your body says no. Your energy says no. Your will says no. But your mouth says yes. Why? Because you are afraid of disappointing. Because you learn that your refusal can lead to rejection. Because you believe that being accepted is more important than being honest. So you go, force a smile, tell jokes, listen to conversations that don't interest you, and leave more tired than you arrived. And the most tragic part, you do this all the time. Another common pattern of self-betrayal is making promises to yourself that you never keep. Starting Monday, I will take better care of myself. I will get out of this toxic relationship. I will stop accepting less than I deserve. But Monday comes and nothing changes. Why? Because when your self-esteem depends on the approval of others, you learn to prioritize others' expectations. Your own needs become an annoying detail, something that can wait, that can be postponed, that can be forgotten. You turn into an eternal caretaker of others' desires while your own rot in the basement of your consciousness. And perhaps the most devastating example of all, hiding your emotions. How many times have you said, "I'm fine," when everything was falling apart? How many times have you smiled in public with tears welling up inside? This is not just a disguise, it is an emotional amputation. Goffman observed that social stages do not tolerate raw truth, intense emotions, vulnerabilities, real pains. All of this threatens the stability of the performance. So, to maintain appearances, you learn to silence yourself. But silence, over time, becomes a prison. These micro-betrayals accumulate. They add up in invisible layers of frustration, guilt, and resentment. You start to feel anger towards people, but deep down, it is anger at yourself for never standing up. You begin to feel tired, but it is a fatigue of existing without being. You start to doubt your own identity, because honestly, you don't even remember who you were before you started playing so many roles. This process is what Goffman called the divided self. Each context demands a different version of you. And when these versions do not communicate with each other, you begin to feel like a stranger within your own skin. There is no cohesion, no unity, no truth. There are only adaptations, concessions, and performances. But what happens when this process intensifies to the point that you no longer feel what you feel? When you act without thinking, respond without reflecting, and live as if you are outside of yourself. This is where we enter the next stage of this disconnection, the phenomenon of existential dissociation, or, as Goffman defined with surgical precision, the distancing of the role, the complete separation between who you are and what you do. This is what we will talk about next. When Goffman introduced the concept of role distance, he was pointing to one of the most disturbing experiences of contemporary life, the moment when the individual continues to act, fulfilling their functions, but is no longer present within themselves. It is as if there is an invisible separation between the person and the role they represent. And this separation, instead of liberating you do what needs to be done, respond to what is expected to be heard, complete tasks, smile in social settings, but all of this happens mechanically, anesthetized, empty. The soul, there, no longer inhabits the body. This type of dissociation does not appear suddenly. It is built, layer by layer, over years of self-silencing, self-denial, and forced adaptations. It is the final result of a trajectory where performance has overshadowed presence, and the expectations of others have imposed themselves over internal will. You do not notice when it begins, but at some point, you look at your routine and realize you are just following a script. A script that you did not even write. This state of role distance generates a very specific symptom, the feeling of living on autopilot. You wake up, follow the agenda, respond to messages, deliver projects, interact with colleagues, but inside, everything seems blurred. There is an emptiness that no achievement fills. You feel disconnected from the things you do, even from those you once loved. Life pathos, but you are not in it. More than fatigue or stress, this phenomenon is existential. It is the feeling of being outside oneself. It is observing yourself as if you were another person, following movements that no longer have meaning. And the most tragic part, this has become the norm for millions of people. Living without presence has become the standard. Society not only allows this dissociation, it rewards highly functional, productive, respected people, and completely disconnected from themselves. And it is not just about exhaustion. It is about the absence of identity. When you live only responding to what each social environment demands, you stop listening to your own voice. Over time, you no longer even know what you like, what you feel, what you want. Your choices become automatic reactions to external stimuli. You do not decide, you respond. You do not desire, you obey. You do not live, you execute. Goffman shows us that this distancing is a kind of defense. It occurs when the role we are playing becomes so dissonant in relation to our true self that we can only continue acting if we emotionally disconnect. It is like putting on armor to withstand the pain of not being who you are. The strategic collapse is painful, but it is a rite of passage, a rebirth. It's where the actor dies and the subject is born, where you stop acting under the eyes of others and start living from your own center, where silence ceases to be suffocation and becomes listening, where loneliness, instead of being abandonment, becomes reconnect. But here arises the most important question. What happens after the collapse? When silence finally arrives? Who is left? Who are you without the performance? That's where the second phase of the journey begins. The reconstruction of identity from authenticity, and that's what we will talk about in the next part. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebook. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. With each new truth, you have the courage to speak. With each boundary you set, with each expectation you refuse to carry, the people around you begin to react. Some distance themselves. And here is one of the revelations of this journey. Not everyone around you loves you. Many love the version you offered in exchange for acceptance. Many were attached to the character, the helpful one, the always available one, the one who never complains, the one who always understands. By removing this character from the scene, you disappoint them. You break the invisible contract of agreement, and because of that, you will lose people. You will create discomfort. You will hear phrases like "you've changed" or "you're different." But the truth is, you haven't changed. You just stopped lying. This process is unsettling, but absolutely necessary, because as long as your identity is based on the desire to be accepted by everyone, you will continue to mold yourself to fit into spaces that were never made for your soul. Goffman shows us that social stability depends on a consensus. But this consensus, most of the time, is sustained at the cost of individual authenticity. That peace you felt by pleasing everyone was, in fact, a silent war against yourself. But there is also the other side. When the stages collapse, when the mask falls, when the actor leaves the scene and the real person appears, something new begins to blossom. People who are on the margins of your life come closer. Spaces that once seemed unattainable become accessible. What was once an obligation turns into it. And this is one of the greatest gifts of authenticity. You cease to be tolerated and begin to be loved, not for a character, but for you. This new reorganization of relationships has a transformative effect. the connections that remain become more nourishing, more reciprocal. You no longer need to negotiate your presence, nor hide your pain. You can make mistakes. You can say no. You can have bad days, and still continue to be accepted. Authenticity not only pushes away what is false, it also attracts what is true. But this only happens after you have the courage to risk loss, after you renounce the illusion of control, and that's when something even more important is revealed. The reconnection with yourself. When the stages quiet down and the audience shrinks, silence remains. And it is in this silence that your true voice can emerge. A voice you may have forgotten. A voice that doesn't need to convince anyone, nor justify its existence. You need to start honoring what you feel, what you desire, and what you need. You need to start living according to your truth, and no longer according to the expectations of others. And it is precisely this internal commitment, this pact with your own essence, that marks the beginning of true freedom. In the next and final part, we will talk about this rebirth, about how to rebuild a life based on authenticity, about how to make each choice reflect your deepest self, and no longer just a response to the gaze of others, because now, finally, you are free to be who you are. When the stages crumble and the masks finally fall, what remains is what has always been there, but was silenced. There is no script to follow, no audience to applaud. What exists is a fertile and unexplored ground. After years, sometimes decades, of living under layers of self-abandonment, you will need to rebuild your sense of identity from scratch. You will have to relearn to listen to your own body, to trust your emotions, to respect your limits, and perhaps the most challenging of all, to honor your desires without guilt. It is at this point that many give up. They miss the predictability of old roles, the comfort of masks, the false security of pleasing others. The discomfort you feel now is the price of freedom. And freedom, contrary to what many say, is not comfortable. It is demanding. It requires authenticity all the time. That you say no, even when you fear losing someone. That you choose what is right for you, even when the whole world points in another direction. This process is profoundly lonely, but it is also profoundly true. For the first time, you become the author of your own story. You are no longer reacting to life. You are building it. And on this new path, every choice becomes a mirror. You begin to observe yourself with more honesty. You start to notice the moments when you almost returned to the old role, but chose to remain true to yourself. You begin to recognize the small victories, the day you rested without guilt, the moment you withdrew from a toxic environment, the conversation where you spoke with your heart exposed without hiding. And perhaps for the first time, you look in the mirror and recognize yourself, not as someone perfect, but as someone whole. Someone who doesn't need to betray themselves to be loved. Someone who, instead of performing, simply exists. And that changes everything, because when you stop betraying yourself, the world around you begins to reorganize. The opportunities that arise are more coherent. The people who remain are more genuine. And life, finally, begins to taste like life, not like acting. So, if something in this video touched you, write in the comments. No more abandoning myself. Write it as a public commitment to your truth. And if you feel that this journey is still at the beginning, keep watching. The next video is as important.